What was supposed to be a 24-hour ceasefire in Sudan Tuesday lasted just minutes before residents say they heard gunfire and explosions starting up again. Fighting between the country's army and a paramilitary group has killed more than 180 civilians and injured nearly 2,000 more since Saturday. CBS News foreign correspondent Debora Patta has more.
A city of over 6 million people turned into this, as hostilities between two rival Sudanese generals exploded into all-out war. Gunshots rang out in residential areas, fighter jets thundered across apartment blocks, and Khartoum's international airport was engulfed in flames. And as usual, civilians were caught in the middle.
We're fine. We're safe. The power has been out. That was something. You know, it's like, I don't even know what it is anymore.
The U.S. has urged Americans in Khartoum to stay indoors. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said yesterday a clearly marked U.S. diplomatic convoy was fired on. Nobody was harmed, but in calls with both generals, he said the action was reckless and irresponsible.
I made very clear that any attacks, threats, dangers posed to our diplomats were totally unacceptable.
A 24-hour humanitarian ceasefire was supposed to start earlier tonight, but it has had little effect, and heavy gunfire could still be heard in the capital long after it was supposed to begin.
The U.S. State Department says contingency planning for U.S. personnel in Sudan is underway. But, John, the airport remains closed, and there are currently no plans for the coordinated evacuation of American civilians.
Debora Patta, thank you. Cameron Hudson joins me now. He's the senior associate of the Africa program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Cameron, just to start, help us understand the differences between the two factions, where they come from, what they're fighting over, and also the differences in their capabilities.
Sure. Well, the first is the National Army of Sudan, the Sudan Armed Forces. They are probably the most dominant institution in the country and see themselves very much as the guarantors of Sudan's sort of constitutional independence. They have a long history of running the country under military dictatorships and have a very close relationship with Egypt and Saudi Arabia and other countries where they've received a lot of training. They're pitted against the Rapid Support Forces, which is the successor force to the Janjaweed militia, the group that carried out scorched earth policies against Darfuri civilians under then dictator Omar al-Bashir. They have accumulated a great deal of wealth in Darfur, taking over gold mining areas, and use that wealth to recruit an army almost the same size as the Sudan Armed Forces. These are the two forces pitted against each other right now over a question of security sector reform, whether one will be incorporated into the other and how that will work.
And there was an ongoing humanitarian crisis before this started. Remind us about that and how that is compounded by these hostilities.
Well, almost a third of Sudan's population is on some kind of international humanitarian assistance or food aid, over 15 million people. And so that was already a very tenuous situation. But in the fighting that's gone on in the last 4 days, we've seen the international airport closed. We've seen the Port of Sudan closed, and we've seen basically all major roads crisscrossing the country closed or roadblocks set up. So right now, humanitarian assistance is not working. 3 days ago, three World Food Program employees were killed in their compound, shutting down the distribution of food aid. And so there's really, I think, very little time left to begin redelivering food aid until we start to see yet another humanitarian crisis in the country.
What are U.S. national security interests other than the obviously the humanitarian one in Sudan?
Well, Sudan borders 7 countries in the Horn of Africa, all of which have seen some level of instability and insecurity. Many of these countries have a new Russian presence through the Wagner Group. And let's not forget that Sudan sits astride the Red Sea, has one of the longest Red Sea coasts. So it's a highly strategic area. one where there's a great geopolitical competition going on already, and where Sudan could really draw in many of the other neighboring states, creating really a catastrophe for humanitarian and political interests that the United States has there.
And so, Cameron, if somebody was to get on the phone and try to use diplomatic pressure to resolve this situation, who's the best country to get on the phone, and who would they call?
Well, so far we've seen Secretary Blinken working the phones quite actively. The principal people he should be on the phone with are the Egyptians, who are Sudan's neighbor to the north, and who, by many accounts, already are participating in some way in this conflict. They see this as a direct national security threat to them on their southern border. Separately, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates across the Red Sea in the Gulf are the two other kind of power players in Sudan. They've invested very heavily in the agricultural sector in Sudan. It is a breadbasket for their economies. And so they have real national security interests as well in the country. I think those are the three players that Washington needs to be, aligning with right now to try to bring an end to this violence.
Cameron Hudson, thank you for laying that out so clearly for us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.